773 accidents per year, and Old Road 122 accidents per year. The worst speeding spots were Johnson Long Path, which is by Ross University, and Kim Collins Highway. And the roundabout accidents are due to poor usage. So, I hope everybody is listening. This is how you use a roundabout in St. Kitts and Nevis, by using an example of the famous Central Bank roundabout. And let me explain what the law is. The law is that signage is first. What the signs tell you is what you must do. The backup for roundabouts is anything before 12 o'clock is the left lane. Anything after 12 o'clock is the right lane. Let me explain. If you are traversing the Central Bank roundabout, which a lot of people know, coming from the Frisco gas station or Automotive at TDC Home Depot from town, and you're going on the Kim Collins Highway, you take the red arrow in the left lane and you go left. If you're going to Frigate Bay, you take the left lane and go around in the red arrows to Frigate Bay. If you're going to Rams or to Central Bank, you take the inner lane and you go around to Bird Rock, Rams, Central Bank. And if you're coming all the way around, you take the inner lane and come all the way around. And you use your traffic signals. When we go on traffic tests on the road, we have to use our hand. I don't know where we get from using our hand and using the traffic signal on the car to using nothing at all. Those are there for a reason. Because when you're entering a roundabout, you're entering and then you're exiting. When you're exiting, you should use your indicator to indicate that you are exiting. One of the other issues that we have at roundabouts, which we observed yesterday firsthand, is that you have to give way to all traffic coming from your right. If there's a car in the roundabout, when you're approaching it, it doesn't matter which lane that car is in, you give way to it. Because you could have someone that is coming on the inner lane who is going to go straight across. You give way to all traffic on your right at a roundabout. Second slide. If you're coming from Frigate Bay to this roundabout and you're going to Rams, you use the left lane, the red arrows. If you're going to town from Frigate Bay, you use the left lane and you use the red arrows and you go to town, to TDC, to Frisco. If you're going to Kim Collins, you use the inner lane, which is the blue arrow. Or if you're going around, you use the blue arrow and go all the way around. Next slide. If you're coming from Bird Rock and you're going to Kim Collins, you use the left lane, the red arrows. If you're going to town, you use the left lane, red arrows. If you're going to Frigate Bay from Rams, you use the inner lane and you go around in the inner lane to Frigate Bay, not in the outer lane as we observed numerous vehicles doing yesterday. Persons think you should go all the way around in the outer lane. That is not what you should do. You should be in the inner lane, you should hug the roundabout, and then when you're ready to exit to go to Frigate Bay, you put on your indicator and you go there. The other thing that we observe is that the person who entered the roundabout first or before you, you should not pass them. That person has the right of way before you. So you do not overtake that person. And if you're coming back around, use the inner lane and come back around. And the last one is if you're coming from Kim Collins and you're going to Frigate Bay, you use the left lane, you stay on the outside and you go. If you're going to Bird Rock, you stay on the outer lane and you go around. If you're going to Frisco gas station or TDC or Automotive Art, use the inner lane, you come around. And if you're going back around, use the inner lane. The simple rule is anything up to 12 o'clock is the left lane. Anything after 12 o'clock is the inner lane. That's the rule you have to remember. Now, when the committee met, we looked at the data. We then prepared what we called our urgent recommendations, so pre-report recommendations, which include construction of speed bumps in high-risk areas, amending the legislation for automatic ticketing systems. It has been proven throughout the world that automatic ticketing systems work. When people know that there are cameras and they're likely to get a ticket in the mail, if they're speeding, they don't speed. We also recommended stiffer penalties for speeding and dangerous driving violations. I want to make it clear, not for tickets. There's no increase for the speeding ticket in this proposed amendment. It is increasing the fines for careless and reckless and dangerous driving. That is what this amendment does. And we also plan to enhance road markings and signage around the roundabouts, hopefully in partnership with the private sector who have indicated their willingness to assist. The next steps, what we're doing today, implementation of some of the urgent recommendations. We're going to go out to the public and do consultations. We're still figuring out how we're doing that, if we're going to have a monthly or a bi-weekly radio program, if we're going to go to town hall and so forth. But people have been submitting their emails to roadsafety@gov.kn to give us ideas on different areas where there are trouble spots in the different communities. We're also going to further analyze the data. We're going to hire professional consultants to advise us on traffic flow and other issues. We're going to draft the report, submit it to Cabinet, and then when the report is agreed, we will then publish it so the general public is aware. That is my presentation, Madam Speaker, on the Sustainable Road Safety Project. Now, particular regard to the bill. As the member for number 8 has said, it is increasing the fines, not creating minimum fines, but the maximum fines for reckless and dangerous driving, also for repeat offenses. Reckless and dangerous driving is driving that is either at a high speed or in such a manner that could cause harm to the general public, not having consideration for the circumstances. So for example, on a wet road, you should be more cautious. When you have bare tires, you should not be driving on a wet road. You shouldn't have bare tires in the first place, because that could be used as part of your recklessness. You should not go on a road where your threads on your tires are showing. When we were on the road yesterday, we saw numerous vehicles, including trucks, that had their thread showing on their tire, meaning that tire had no grip. So naturally, on a wet road, if there's any sort of mishap, or if you're going at a speed, you can easily lose control. Careless driving, which is a lesser standard, which is just you being careless. The fines were increased to take into consideration when there are incidents of bodily injury and when there are incidents that don't involve bodily injury. The fines are different. Also in relation to driving under the influence of alcohol or other substances that can inhibit your mind, can affect your mind and your ability to analyze and to process information. And one of the fundamental changes in the amendment is that causing death by dangerous driving, which was a 5-year offense, is now going to be a 10-year max offense. I cannot see in any way how that is unreasonable, because manslaughter, which could be a charge if you cause death by dangerous driving, has a maximum of life imprisonment. So if you're causing a death, every life is precious. Then there's a penalty for that. And we have some penalties around the world are 25 years for causing death by dangerous driving. But what this amendment does, it doubles the penalty from 5 to 10. So to discourage and deter people from overtaking around corners, overtaking over hills, up hills. I see it all the time, Madam Speaker, and I'm sure many people in this country do. There's a level of recklessness that I cannot even explain. Yesterday on the road, the amount of people we saw not wearing seatbelts, it was unbelievable to me. Because most vehicles, even if they are old, they make the noise when you don't put the seatbelt on as a driver. But I was told by the traffic officers, what people do is they simply clip it behind them. And they leave it like that. And they drive on the road without putting on a seatbelt. And I just found that to be, I still am unable to process why you would think that it's safe to drive. I see one of the members opposite smiling. I hope he doesn't do that. Nobody should be doing that. Your seatbelt is there, and the reason why the cars beep when your seatbelt is not buckled is because it's not safe for you to drive, especially as a driver with a steering wheel in front of you, airbag or not, without seatbelts save lives. The audiovisual persons in the Parliament are very, very proactive. Seatbelts save lives, Madam Speaker. Also, the automatic ticketing, as I indicated, we are proposing that the amendment, and one of the amendments we intend to propose as an alternative to the actual circulated bill, is that to make the automated system work, what has to happen is the owner of the vehicle has to get the ticket. Let's take it to its logical conclusion, Madam Speaker. If you're driving on the Kim Collins Highway where there's a camera right now, and the camera catches the vehicle before it passes the speed sensor, after it passes the speed sensor, and it gets the license plate. It doesn't necessarily capture who is driving. So how automated systems work is that the ticket is sent to the owner of the vehicle. The owner of the vehicle from then can decide, you know, you borrowed my car and you went and sped on the Kim Collins Highway, but the owner is still the one that is responsible. So the amendment provides for the summons or the ticket to be issued to the actual owner of the vehicle, because the police have the records of the owner, even though the owner might not be the driver. But that is, now owners have to also think about, who am I lending my car to? And you have the ultimate responsibility. If you want to collect from the person who borrowed your car, you go and do that. The same system, our traffic lights, we are informed by the member of the committee, Mr. Daniel, who is the traffic light engineer, are configured such that we can install red light cameras. I give this story. I visited another Caribbean island recently. I won't mention the name. But I observed with the officer, the protocol officer that was driving me, that every red light, 5 people came through it. 5 people, every red light, they came through the red light. Almost like it was the culture. That is one of the most dangerous and reckless things you can do, because when you come through a red light, somebody else more than likely who is perpendicular to you is coming through a green light, and you can be T-boned. One of our PSAs got T-boned on the Bay Road by Sandown Road. I have known other people who have been hit, their cars have been hit by persons coming through red lights. It is extremely dangerous. Oh yes, the third most unsafe place after Johnson Long Path and Kim Collins is Sandown Road. The Sandown Road traffic lights that intersect with Bay Road. So we cannot tolerate that in St. Kitts and Nevis, because our intention is to save lives. So what we're going to do is we're going to send out procurement for our RFP for persons to provide the automated red light camera. So just as the example given by the member for number 8, if you run the red light, you're going to get a nice message in the mail, or police summon you with a ticket to say that you have run the red light, breached the traffic laws, and you therefore have a fine. If it is you do that repeatedly, you can have your license suspended. Because part of the amendment, I like this team. Madam Speaker, they have provided the actual traffic lights on the Bay Road, which there are many. I travel there almost every day. And when I come out to Sandown Road, even when the light is green, I still look, because I have known too many people who have had incidents at that corner. So this amendment will allow the state, the licensing authority, to be able to implement that automatic ticketing if you run red light. Stop at the red light. Yellow does not mean speed up. The yellow light actually means slow down. Be cautious, because the light is about to turn red. But now, when I'm driving, coming from the east on Keon Street, at least 2 cars come through from Victoria Road, that red light. I don't know what is so hard about waiting for 1.5 minutes for the light to turn green again. But if people are not willing to be responsible, the Parliament must take responsibility and implement measures to deter those actions which cause lives. I also want to speak in a little detail about the reward system. This is not just a government thing. This is an all of us thing. When a family loses 2 members because of reckless driving, that is a community and family issue. We all must be in this together. So part of our collective responsibility is this reward system implemented under the amendment. What it does, it says, is that if you have a dash cam, and a dash cam simply is a camera that is installed in your car that looks forward. Some of them actually have it in their rear. This is an example of a dash cam, Madam Speaker. It's installed, it either goes on your rearview mirror or it goes on your dash, and it records what's in front of you. So if you are driving, and I observe traffic offenses and reckless driving all the time, you can simply take your dash cam footage, deliver it to the police. We're going to give a designated entity how you do it and an email address. You can then provide an affidavit stating, this is my name, this is the dash cam brand I use, this is the video, I presented the video XYZ. That does not necessarily go to court. If you say you want it to be done anonymously, then the evidence can be presented anonymously. Nobody will ever know that it's through your dash cam the footage was provided. It can also be a pedestrian on the road who sees reckless driving as recording. Say somebody is on a video call while they're standing on the side of the road, and an accident, they see an accident about to happen, and they switch their camera around and they record it. That can also be submitted. And as the member for number 8 said, if the information you have provided results in a conviction, the court can decide to give you a reward of up to $5,000 for provision of that evidence. And that amount is not paid by the state, it is paid by the convicted person. So the convicted person could potentially pay a fine, be imprisoned, and pay a reward or contribution to the person who provided the evidence that was able to allow for the conviction. This can also be used in cameras on people's homes. Some people have cameras that point in intersections or on the road. That sort of evidence can be submitted under the reward system. And as the member for number 8 said, dash cams from today will be duty-free. So if you want to import, to order, to bring it in, it will be duty-free from today. So we're encouraging a resident participation in the process of ensuring that there's safety on the road. And one of the other measures in the amendment is the fine, inclusion of a fine of $500 for persons who do not use proper car seats for children traveling in vehicles. And I want to, Madam Speaker, if you could just give me a second so I could pull up the act. I want to make it clear what the legislation says in regard to child seats, so that everyone can be aware and there's no confusion. And I encourage persons to use Voice It to find out about the laws of St. Kitts and Nevis. It says here that the driver of a vehicle shall ensure that once that vehicle is in motion, a child seat that contains a passenger shall be positioned in the rear seat of the vehicle. A child seat shall be used in any case where a passenger is under the height of 3 feet. The child seat referred to in sub-regulation 2 must be suitable for the weight of the particular passenger and must be installed and used in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. My kids are big now, but I use car seats. I remember how to hook you. They have a clamp it's about 3 pounds that hooks into the back seat of the car. And then you also put the seat belt in it. And it is, when you shake it, it's almost like it shakes the car because it almost becomes part of the frame of the car. And that is what protects children. I am tired, Madam Speaker, if you would allow me to say, of driving, looking across, and seeing 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds standing up in the middle of the back seat, hands around the front seat, while a parent is driving them. I find that unbelievable, because the number one duty of a parent is to protect their children. And in order to protect your child, you must have them either in the rear seat, up to 14 years old, wearing a seatbelt, or you have them in an appropriate child seat from birth, the stand-up child seat a little after infancy, and then a booster chair until they get to the point where they are tall enough so that the seatbelt can cover their chest properly. So, anybody found by the police to be traveling with a child without a child seat, appropriate child seat, will be subject to a ticket of $500. And to counteract that, the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, member for number 8 has said all child seats will be duty-free from today onward, so that persons can more afford to have them. I encourage parents whose children graduate from the various seats to either find a friend who has a small child and donate. I don't have my car seats anymore. I have donated them to friends, given them away to friends. Or take them to the Ministry of Youth Affairs so that they can find persons who may not be able to afford car seats to use the car seats. And I think the minister will speak a little bit about that. But we have to look out for each other, Madam Speaker, and it's very important that we protect our young people. We cannot let the life of that 4-month-old child taken from us earlier this month not be a lesson for us to do better and be better. It's an unfortunate lesson, but it's a lesson that needs to change the culture of our driving and our behavior when it comes to children in our vehicles and their security and safety in this country. And Madam Speaker, I want, yes, one more point before I wrap up. I don't want anyone to be concerned about this video reporting system. As I said, it can be anonymous. If you don't care whether there's anonymity, you can put your name, but it's important for us to come together as a community and report incidents of reckless driving. The goal of all of these amendments, even though short and limited in scope, is to save lives, because every life is precious. And I undertake, as chair of the Sustainable Road Safety Project, to give my all to make sure that this project becomes a reality. Everyone on the committee is committed. I don't think I've ever, other than cabinet, I've never seen such a passionate entire group of people. We are excited to change the culture of our road traffic in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we are committed to doing the best we can do for the people of this country, and we intend to provide a comprehensive report to the people, hopefully by the end of this year, so that we can implement and we can ensure that incidents that happened in New Guinea, incidents that happened on the F.T. Williams Highway, and incidents that happened on Johnson Long Path do not become a norm. They become activities that we do not see in our society. And with those few words, Madam Speaker, may it please you.
Thank you to the Honorable Attorney General, seconder of the bill. I recognize the Honorable Member for Neveston.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I rise to make a brief contribution to the bill before this Honorable House today. And first of all, I want to say that I do welcome this, the amendments and this bill, and probably may come a little late, but at least it's here. Of course, we have to be as much in the Federation as proactive as possible instead of just being reactive. And so, as I said, I welcome the bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I rise to make a brief contribution. I want to say first, I want to join with the others in extending condolences to the family of that little precious infant. And I also want to say that in that same accident, we almost lost our Miss Culture swimwear winner. Yes, Miss Khadija Lewis. She's the current Miss Culture swimwear. And so we in Nevis, from the Ministry and the Department of Culture, we want to say we stand with her as well, and we wish her a very speedy recovery, because we know she was critically injured in that accident. And so I trust and hope that she will have a speedy recovery. So Miss Lewis, if you're listening, or anybody for her, we have been trying to reach out to her for some time, but we haven't been able to do so. So we are in solidarity with our Miss Culture swimwear, Miss Lewis. Madam Speaker, I would have spoken about these accidents and so on during our last sitting here in December during the budget debates. And I just wanted to lend my voice again. Madam Speaker, I listen to the news very often because I like to keep myself informed. And I was listening to Vaughan News recently, and when I heard the reporter report that in 2024 there were nearly 1,800 accidents in St. Kitts and Nevis, I stopped what I was doing right away because I was wondering if I was hearing correctly. But then when the clip came in from the traffic official to substantiate what the news item was saying, that is when I really believed that we had almost 1,800 accidents in little St. Kitts and Nevis. Madam Speaker, why are we having almost 1,800? I mean, the figures suggested it was over 1,300 in St. Kitts and over 400 on Nevis. Small federation, 2 small islands, 400 in Nevis, over 1,300 on St. Kitts. And Madam Speaker, irrespective of how small they may have been, because of course some of them are small and insignificant, but the fact is there were traffic accidents and some of them could have led to fatalities. And when we look at the fatalities for 2024, 13. And when I just heard the figures being released there by the Attorney General, I mean, you know, as I sat here, it almost sounded like when we were reporting on homicides. And when we check the homicide figures for these years and the figures for road fatalities, Madam Speaker, and we combine them, do we realize how many productive lives we have lost in a short space of time, which could have been avoided? And so I believe we should all speak with one voice from this Honorable House, that the behavior of some of our drivers on the road is not acceptable and should be condemned when they are driving too fast, when they are driving under the influence, or what have you. Madam Speaker, I just wanted to reiterate some of the things were said by the mover of the bill, because these accidents just don't happen like that. One of the main things is speeding. We hear of that. And we want to reiterate as well that nowhere in St. Kitts, I don't know about St. Kitts, but nowhere in Nevis is far. Nowhere is far. And I keep telling people that all of the time. Nowhere is far. You could get from point A to point B in a very short space of time. You can get around the island in Nevis in less than an hour. Less than an hour. And of course, with the excellent roads that we have now, I mean, it cuts down the time significantly as well. And so there is absolutely no need for you to be speeding. Some persons want to leave home at 8 to get to work for 8. And that is not possible. It is not possible. And bearing in mind that almost everybody on the road, almost everybody has a vehicle now, you're actually seeing traffic blocks now, traffic jams now, you know? And so almost everybody has a vehicle. And so you can't expect that you're going to leave home at 8 to get to work for 8. That is not possible, right? And so we need to cut down on the speeding. And when the AG spoke about the trucks, oh Lord of mercy. When I see these truck drivers and the rate that they're going on the roads, Madam Speaker, I mean, it's frightening. Because you know, if one of these big trucks catch you, they're going to crush you. You know? And you not only have to look out for the other drivers, you have to look out for the pedestrians as well. Because there are times when people are actually exercising on the road, and it's a bit frightening sometimes with the speed with which they pass you. And we have to be mindful of that. And so I am here once again asking our people, our drivers, please be mindful of how you drive on the road. You can be killing yourself, you can be killing your relative, you could be killing your friend. And so the speeding is absolutely not necessary, irrespective of what time of the day or night, whether it's 2 or 3 in the morning, as the mover said, there's no time for that, for the speeding. And there's no place in St. Kitts and Nevis for speeding when we are such a small country. Madam Speaker, the cell phone use is a big issue as well. Huge issue. And we need to continue to plug this. We need to continue to talk about it on a daily basis. I remember a couple of days ago I was on the road, and a vehicle was coming straight at me, and I had to honk my horn. And then a couple of days later, I saw the lady who was driving the vehicle, and she said, "Eric, I apologize." She came and she was smiling. She said, "I apologize." He said, "You know what happened? My cell phone was ringing, and I was searching in the bag for the cell phone." And we know ladies have a hard time finding something in their bag, because the bag is always cluttered with so many things that I'm sure you have that problem, Madam Speaker, as well, in finding things in your bag. Right? And so she was searching in her bag for her cell phone. And she driving. And so she said, "Lord, please, I beg your pardon, but I was searching in my bag for my cell phone." In the meantime, she was coming over on me. If I didn't honk my horn, it would have been an accident. And, you know, sometimes we observe people on the road, and I know, because Nevis is small, you see people on the road often. And I know there's one particular individual. And almost every time I see that individual on the road, they're driving, one hand on the wheel, and the phone is like this. And I keep saying, are these people for real? And so this cell phone thing, when we get into our vehicles, we need to put them aside. Put them aside. I know sometimes they're connected to the vehicle and you can, but sometimes even that distracts you. And it's amazing what a small distraction could cause a massive accident. No matter how you think, I'm just going to pick it up quickly, that distraction could cause a massive accident, and it could cause fatalities. And so we want to encourage our drivers, stay away from the cell phone. There's nothing too urgent that you can't pick up the conversation when you get to work or when you get at home. Stay off the cell phone, please, when you're driving. And of course, when you're driving under the influence. You know, Madam Speaker, a lot of the times, I mean, our local folks here believe that it's just when you go out to a party, when you go out to a bar, it's cool to drink a case of beer and then you get behind the wheel. And you know, sometimes people are actually competing as to see who can drink the most. That is not cool. Drivers, that is not cool. Young folks, that is not cool. It's not cool. There's nothing wrong with having a drink. But you have to be mindful. You have to be mindful that when you drink a little too much and you get behind the wheel, that could actually be your last breath. So please, I'm asking persons to be mindful of that as well, Madam Speaker. And so we must speak with one voice from this Honorable House, and we must encourage people to desist from the bad practices that are causing 1,800 accidents in St. Kitts and Nevis. We are hoping that when the statistics come out for 2025, it could be less than 8. Instead of 1,800, it could be less than 8. Madam Speaker, I have a few questions, though, with regards to the amendments. And as I said, I am in support of I welcome the amendments and I welcome the bill, because we must find a way of putting a curb on these accidents and these road fatalities. And so in the amendment to Section 40, where it says that any person who, when driving or attempting to drive, or when in charge of a motor vehicle on a road and is under the influence of drink or drug, I just want to reiterate here that I'm hopeful that the requisite equipment would be in place to ensure that you know that somebody is under the influence of whether it's drink or drug. Because we cannot assume things these days. In a society where everybody takes you to court, you can't just watch somebody and say, well, your eyes look red, so you look like you were drinking or you were smoking. You have to make sure that you have the equipment that is necessary to prove the fact that the person has been driving under the influence of drug or drink. Madam Speaker, the other question I want to raise, because I read the amendments, and I noticed that there is a heavy influence in the amendments with regards to increased fines and prison time as well. However, noticeably absent, Madam Speaker, is the disqualification of driver's license. Is it, it's there? Well, in some of the amendments, I'm not seeing it. I see it in some, but I think it should be in practically all. It's in all? Oh, it's in the original act. Okay. Well, I was just looking at the amendments because I was saying to myself, that should definitely be a part of it. I was speaking to a young lady who was visiting from England on vacation only this week, actually, earlier this week. And she was saying, well, you know, we were talking about the same thing, drinking and driving. And she was saying that her brother was driving under the influence in England and he lost his license for 5 years. And apart from losing his license for 5 years, he also lost his job because the job that he does says that you cannot be driving under the influence either. So he lost his license for 5 years and he lost his job. So I am happy that at least it's in the parent act and this one as well. Madam Speaker, the last thing I want to raise is that along with what we are doing here in Parliament today, I am hopeful that we will continue with our efforts in terms of proper road signage, proper road markings. I heard the Attorney General speaking about driving around in a roundabout, because I still believe a lot of our drivers do not know how to drive around a roundabout. And so we must be able to flood the airwaves, we must be able to flood social media, the radio and the television with public relations announcement. We must be on a continuous path of public education to ensure that our people are getting the message. If they don't get it on radio, if they don't get it on TV, they get it on social media. And so we must ensure that they are getting that message, Madam Speaker. And so as I said, apart from those few questions that I have, I welcome the amendment, and I would trust and I would hope, and once again, I would beseech our drivers, all of our drivers, kindly be careful on the road, be kind on the road, watch your driving, watch what you're doing before you get behind the wheel, because remember, the life that you save can be your own. With these words, Madam Speaker, I wish to bill safe passage. May it please you.
Thank you to the Honorable. Thank you to the Honorable Member for Nevis 10. I recognize the Honorable Senator Latoya Jones.
Madam Speaker, I rise to deliver brief contribution regarding the important bill, Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2025. I too support the proposed amendments, which include increased fines, extended terms of imprisonment, the suspension of driver's license for traffic violations, the integration of technology such as video footage for enforcement, and the implementation of incentives for public reporting of offenses. Additionally, I endorse continuous efforts to improve road conditions and signage to enhance the safety of our road networks. I also welcome the automated ticketing system as mentioned by the mover of the bill. Madam Speaker, these measures are pivotal in deterring behaviors such as speeding, reckless driving, and driving under the influence. While these legislative changes signify a substantial advancement, it is crucial to underscore the significance of personal responsibility and accountability. Madam Speaker, we are here doing our part, And so I want to take this opportunity to encourage the public to do their part as well. All of us, Madam Speaker, have to take personal responsibility and accountability. We have to recognize our decisions and actions, and we have to take ownership of them without shifting or without blaming others for our actions. We must self-reflect on our behavior and choices, identify areas for improvement, and make necessary adjustments. I must say, when I was reading the amendments to the bill, I kept saying to myself, where can I improve? Or what it is I am doing that I can do better? And these are questions that we have to ask ourselves, because we are not perfect. Even though we are parliamentarians and we're here making the necessary changes, we too sometimes could be at fault. So we have to work on improving ourselves. We must hold ourselves to high standards as responsible motorists to protect not only our own lives, but also the lives of others. Madam Speaker, reflecting on the past year, I'm profoundly saddened by the tragic loss of lives due to traffic accidents. In St. Kitts Nevis, we mourn the loss of 13 individuals for this year. I think it was mentioned, or last year, sorry. 2019 to 2023, as mentioned, it was 19 lives. I think the Honorable Attorney General mentioned 31, but it's 32 deaths over 6 years. This reality is a poignant reminder of the urgent need for vigilance and responsibility on our roads. At this time, Madam Speaker, I would like to express my condolences to all families who have lost their loved ones in traffic accidents. I know it is not easy losing your loved ones, especially suddenly. Imagine you wake up this morning, you pray together, you eat together, and you drove down the road only to get a call to be told my family was in a tragic accident and she died on the spot. Madam Speaker, it's one thing to be ill and your family know, come to terms and say, things are not looking well, there's a chance this person is going to pass away. It's another when it just happens suddenly. You didn't even get to tell the person, I love you, or goodbye. And so, Madam Speaker, we have to be careful when we are driving on the road. Despite these heartbreaking incidents, we continue to witness a concerning frequency of road-related occurrences. Madam Speaker, I take this opportunity to urge all road users to exercise caution and to assume full responsibility for their conduct while driving. It is essential to consider not only one's convenience, but also the safety of others. Driving is a significant responsibility that warrants the utmost patience and seriousness. Madam Speaker, I know when I was in school, I think it was 5th form, even before I graduated, I'm thinking, I want my license. I want to be able to drive. Mind you, I am not thinking about the seriousness that comes with driving. All I'm thinking, if I want to go to town, you jump in your vehicle, start the ignition, and you go to town. You're not thinking that I could go on the road and possibly, by accident, kill someone. And I want us to reflect on that. Us as young people especially, because that is the attitude that we have. And I'm being honest about it. I never thought of it that way. I'm sure many of us are the same way too. But we have to think about it, long and hard about it. Are we ready to take this step in our lives? Because we have to protect ourselves, protect our families, and protect those around us. Madam Speaker, while encouraging all road users, I want to speak to the bus drivers. And I'm not picking on them. But the reason I single them out is because, Madam Speaker, they carry a lot of passengers. They carry a lot of lives. And while I understand this is the way that they make their money, they earn a living. Remember, the more trips they make, the more passengers they get, the more money they make. Yes, I'm not saying that you can't work to make money, but the lives of your passengers should be priority. You should drive responsibly. The safety of your passengers is and should be paramount. You think if you make $500 today, that could compare to your reckless driving causing the life of one person? No, you can't put money on a life. And so, Madam Speaker, I want to encourage our bus drivers and motorists to drive carefully on the road. Madam Speaker, when our people are faced with temptation to consume alcohol or drugs, or if under time constraints, I encourage individuals to evaluate their decisions carefully. Acting responsibly is vital, which includes refraining from driving under the influence and avoiding speeding or reckless behavior. Furthermore, it is essential to acknowledge that arriving late does not justify engaging in risky behaviors, as such actions can increase the likelihood of accidents. So, if you're attending events, social gatherings, party, I advise you to have a designated driver. I prefer you even call an Uber than get on the road and drive and you're intoxicated or you've been using drugs. As it relates to lateness, Madam Speaker, I think it was mentioned before, if you have a work commitment for 8 a.m. and you leave home 8:05, you're done late. It doesn't change the reality of what is happening. 5 past, half an hour, doesn't matter, you are late. So it is imperative to exercise sound judgment and drive responsibly. Madam Speaker, I want to mention, because I remember while I'm a parliamentarian, I think I could speak to this, I'm a politician as well. And I remember when visiting a village in my constituency, Westbury, the villagers complained about the reckless driving of motorists through the village. A small village. Mind you, yes, we have to improve the road network there, and we have made promises to them to get it done. Could you imagine, even though it's not an entirely smooth road, motorists are still speeding? I got the complaint over and over again until, through my visits, I'm there, and I see the vehicles blazing like they're on a racetrack. And I'm saying to myself, all it takes is for a child or an adult to step out, and that's it. There's no coming back. And so I went to the honorable member for Nevis 9 and the other government officials of the Nevis Island administration, and I said, listen, while I gather we have to repair the road or construct the road, I need speed bumps in that area immediately. And Madam Speaker, we were able to put down the speed bumps, but believe it or not, some people made noise about it. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand why. Because we have to do what we have to do to protect our people. And if you're going to complain about speed bumps in an area, it means that you're the one who's driving reckless. And so I make no apologies for ensuring that speed bumps were installed. And the people of Westbury has thanked me today for it. And if we have to put down speed bumps, we do it, if that is what it takes to protect our people. Madam Speaker, I also strongly recommend that everyone avoid using mobile phones while driving. This habit introduces dangerous distractions that can severely compromise attention to the road. Now, Madam Speaker, I always say I will be honest in my presentation. And while reflecting, and as I said earlier, this area is one I've been working on over the years. No, I have to be honest. Because sometimes you're driving and you get a call, because sometimes people call you over and over. It might be for a meeting, it might be for something, and you take it up, and you're answering it. It happens to all of us. And I had to step back and say to myself, no, I have to wait. Which is more important, the call or driving carefully to save a life? And these are questions that we have to ask ourselves. Now with vehicles, on vehicles, you can connect your phone to Bluetooth. I mean, Honorable Member for Nevis 10 said that too can be a distraction. But however, I find that it works well for me. I no longer have to have the phone in my hand. Or on speaker and being distracted if it might fall. But Madam Speaker, we have to take the necessary steps to protect our people. It is also crucial to prioritize the safety of our children. Please ensure children are secured in appropriate car seats or seat belts before driving. And I know some may say, she's repeating what was said, but we have to repeat it, especially when it comes to our children. Madam Speaker, I remember years ago, I don't even remember how old I was. Time is flying so much that part of me feel like I'm getting old.
You are.
Oh, okay, I'm told I'm old.
So you're getting old.
Well, getting there. But Madam Speaker, I was driving and I had my two cousins in the back of the vehicle. And we were coming around the corner by Liberty, that is in the constituency, Nevis 11. Madam Speaker, to this day, I can't even tell you what happened. I wasn't on my phone. I wasn't driving recklessly. Rain was falling, so I know the road was wet. But for some reason, I find myself spinning around in the car. And then I ended up hitting a wall next to somebody's house. And while doing that, the only thing I did, I put up my hand, because I remember my little cousin, you know, they tend to sit between the chair at the back. And I put up my hand and she hit my hand. And once the car came to a stop, my heart was racing, because I'm not thinking about me. I'm thinking about them at the back and if they're safe. And Madam Speaker, I got out the car, I took them out, I examined them from head to toe. My foot was injured. They had, you know, one of them had a bump on her head. But had anything happened to them, I don't think that I would have been able to forgive myself. And as adults, we have to do all it takes to protect our children. No excuses. A child shouldn't be sitting in front of a vehicle on your lap. We know what the rules are. And imagine, my cousins were at the back, and I felt how I felt. But Madam Speaker, I must admit, they weren't wearing seatbelts at the back. And that's another point I'm going to come to. Madam Speaker, I believe it is essential for all individuals inside a vehicle to wear seatbelts. I recognize that it is a practice here that only individuals at the front wear seatbelts. That is reality. Repeat that. Well, then we need to revise that. We need to change that. Everyone in a vehicle should be wearing seat belts. We should enforce regulations requiring that all passengers do it. Madam Speaker, it is just as important wearing seatbelts, individuals at the back wearing seatbelts as those at the front. They too can get hurt. They too can lose their lives. I remember, I don't know if it was 2 years ago, on my birthday, I journeyed over to St. Kitts to celebrate. And it was myself. Madam Speaker, I shall continue. Madam Speaker, I journeyed to St. Kitts to celebrate my birthday. And the last I checked, St. Kitts Nevis is one federation, and I have all rights to celebrate in St. Kitts as well. Don't I member for Nevis? Of course. Thank you. Nine. Okay. Okay. Madam Speaker, I journeyed to St. Kitts to celebrate my birthday. I was myself and 2 of my friends. And we were in the vehicle, and my friend was speaking about how she lost her sister in an accident in the US, and her sister was at the back. As a matter of fact, this sister was the only person in the accident that died. Everyone else lived. And imagine we were having that conversation, and then we drove along Frigate Bay. Only while we were there, came at a stop for somebody to hit me from the back. And in that moment, I sat there and I was like, but we just spoke about this. We just spoke about this. But luckily, the individual at the back, she was wearing her seatbelt. But I just found it strange that we were just having this conversation and it happened. So, Madam Speaker, we have to make those changes to ensure that passengers at the back also have to wear their seatbelt. Madam Speaker, sometimes when you speak, people like to distract you, but you have to stay focused. You have to stay focused, Madam Speaker. And I want the general public to stay focused, read the amendments, reflect, and make the necessary changes. I wish to reiterate that a life saved through careful and responsible behavior could very well be your own. With these few words, Madam Speaker, I take my leave.
Thank you to the Honorable Senator Jones. I recognize the Honorable Member for Nevis 9.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. There has been already quite a few presentations, and I'm not attempting to prolong the sit-in unduly, but I do believe in light of the tragedies that we have seen unfolding on our roads, that it is important that we lend our voices in support of this effort by the Parliament, by the government, to try to address some of what we are seeing. I just want, Madam Speaker, to make some broad points. I feel that I have heard much from the government side and from the opposition benches as well. All supportive, all good ideas. I join in extending my condolences, as I did in the budget debates, to the families of all those who have lost loved ones. And I join my colleague from Nevis 10 in asking for the speedy recovery of our Miss Culturama swimsuit. It is particularly tragic when we see people taken as these people have been taken from us. Accidents, of course, are by their nature not things that we are prepared for. And so my heart goes out to these families. But I want to make, Madam Speaker, a broad point here, that what we're trying to do today is to legislate behavior. What we're trying to do is to say to our people that they need to adjust their behavior. And there's a word that has crept into my lexicon in recent times where I urge people to be responsible. Why do I say that? The road network in St. Kitts and Nevis continues to improve. Roads are smoother, wider, and we continue to innovate. For example, when I got my license many moons ago, we didn't have roundabouts in Nevis. When I got my license many moons ago, we didn't have streetlights in St. Kitts. In fact, I believe the streetlights in St. Kitts only came maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And oftentimes we graft new technology, put it into being without there being corresponding education. I smiled to myself when the Honorable Attorney General used his diagrams this morning in his video to try to tell people how to use a roundabout. Because that's part of the problem. We have not, as a country, done what is necessary to educate our people in terms of proper road usage. And so you find that people just, because they sometimes don't know, just do what they think is the right thing to do, which sometimes leads to tragedy. But it really comes back to us saying that we want our people to be responsible. The 3 o'clock in the morning that we have heard of, spoken to by the mover, a lot of us, being on the road at that hour, we feel, man, there's nobody on the road, there's no traffic on the road, and so we can speed, we can do whatever it is we're doing on the road. We can race, we can engage in reckless behavior. I say that to say this, that it is inconceivable and it would be frankly silly for us here in the Parliament to think that simply by passing legislation, simply by making it and making the penalties harsher, that we can change behavior out there. That is why the appeal made by the good senator on this side resonates with me, because we have to start with the individuals and we have to say to people, listen, you have responsibility. We have in this country engaged, I feel, in the last several years in what I like to refer to as some social engineering. Cannabis is one of those things. You have a lot of proponents, including myself, who have said, you know, we need to do more to make it more available, to allow our people to engage in business, etc. And I've looked at it from the economic side. And we have in this Parliament over the years tinkered and altered our provisions in relation to ganja, cannabis, marijuana, whatever you want to call it. One of the things that has been sorely missing in our efforts at social engineering, in our efforts at opening up our society to new norms, is the education. So if you go on 4th Street, St. Kitts, or you go on Main Street, Nevis, you see these youngsters, especially on a Friday, rolling up the spliff, smoking in public. As I understand it, that's against the law. But they do it anyway. In fact, I will share with the House that recently I had a meeting with some of the restaurateurs at Pinnes Beach, where we have refurbished and redeveloped that area in Nevis. And they're saying that the youngsters now are coming and sitting at the bar, at the restaurants, and want to light up and smoke right there. I reached out to the police in Nevis and said, listen, we need to do something about it. And I was a little surprised at the response from the police, because the police said to me that they are aware, but apparently it's a ticketable offense, but they've never been given any tickets to hand out. You see, it brings me to the point that was made by the member for number 10. As we look at the legislation and we see things there, for example, about driving under the influence of alcohol, driving under the influence of drugs, The relevant question that springs to mind is, how are we going to know? How are we going to prove? How are we going to monitor to ensure that when persons are in some state, some altered state, let me use that language, that in fact the legislation can catch them? And the efforts that we have made at cannabis, I use that as a good example of where we have come into this house, tried to adjust the norms, where, Madam Speaker, we've come into this house, tried to adjust the norms of behavior, acceptable behavior in the society, said what we will now accept and what we will not accept. And nevertheless, we have not then put in place the mechanisms to allow the police to effectively do what they need to do. So I hear the mover. He said you'll have to walk straight line and do handstand and all kinds of things when they figure that you are inebriated, you're in an altered state. Alcohol, I suppose many of us more familiar with that and how that looks and smells when somebody is perhaps past the limit. But we all know, Madam Speaker, you are learned in the law, I used to be, that the policeman saying he smell alcohol or saying the person look drunk is not going to stand up. So in other countries, they have invested in the infrastructure. So traffic police or police, they have the apparatus to do the breathalyzer, etc. And they have now given that legislative teeth. So if that you fail the breathalyzer, then the consequences follow. I am not aware, and perhaps the Honorable Mover or the Attorney General can educate us, what the equivalent would be for drugs, as they say. We talk about marijuana because I think all of us can attest to the fact that it seems like the use is prevalent in our society. But there are other drugs. There are hallucinogens. There are drugs, some take you up, some take you down. What then can we put in place? Because some of these drugs may not have a smell. So here when a man smoking his spliff and his windows are up and the police stop him, the police may get a whiff right away. But what about if he snorted something? What about if he shot something up in his arm? He's nevertheless under the influence. How are we going to police? Because I have come to the view about my country that we could stay in here and talk till the cows come home. Until actions have consequences, nothing is going to change. I hear the admonitions about seatbelt, about children in car seats, about those in the back wearing seatbelts, about the use of cell phones. Which of us can say we don't know that this is the right thing to do? I heard the Attorney General, and again I smile because the Attorney General in his submission to this House is saying that he went out himself to the byways and highways of this island and he saw for himself breaches. You know why? Because our people don't care. That's why, it don't make no sense we here and try to sugarcoat it. Our people don't care. When somebody dies on the road now, here people make comments on social media, Lord, another one gone. But in terms of taking that personal responsibility, and the only way we're going to get our people to take responsibility is to ensure that we enforce the law. So when we see people without a seatbelt, or speeding, or using the cell phone, if we're not ticketing them, if we're not holding them responsible, then after a while, it becomes the norm. I had an incident in Nevis just a few weeks ago, where a public servant came to see me to say that a certain action that she had been engaged in at her workplace had now been, she had received a letter to say she could no longer continue. And I said, but why would you have been engaging in this action at your workplace? And the worker responded and said, but I've been doing it for a long time. Nobody ever told me that I can't do it. Turns out, it's against the SRNOs. But as the worker said, nobody ever told her. So now her complaint is, why you come telling me no? Why did you not enforce the provision all the time? Because she was doing what she was doing openly, it wasn't in secret. And that, I think, continues to be the problem in our country. The Parliament passes law. We give big speeches in this House. We say all the right things. But then out on the street, it does not translate because we then do not do the necessary things. So when the police said to me that smoking ganja in public is a ticketable offense, but they don't have the tickets, that tells me that we are not getting the essence of what we're seeking to do in here translated out there. And I don't know, I ask people if the high is better if they do it in public, because I don't understand. I grew up in a place in Nevis called Brownhill, and everybody in Brownhill except me used to smoke. Positive. What I don't understand, Madam Speaker, is that people used to do their thing, but the man would do his thing home. The Rasta man, them would do their thing if they get together. Now it seems fellas leave, travel miles to get into town to sit down on 4th Street. Because the weed no sweet. The high not a good high unless you're doing it on 4th Street. It's like a show self thing now. So you go down to Penny's and you sit down at one of the bars and you're on the stool and you wrap your joint and you smoke your joint because somehow you got to show people. And this behavior is not going to change unless we start to do what we need to do to crack down on it. So we are engaged in social engineering. We are asking people to change their attitudes, change their modes of behavior. And I've come to the realization, sad as it is, that appealing to people's good nature is not going to be enough. I saw a quote the other day say, good people knowingly do bad things. And I said, what? Sounds odd. I said, yeah. People may know that something is wrong, but they do it still. So there has to be the controls. And we as Parliament, when we pass legislation, translate that through the society with enforcement. Otherwise, we're spinning top in mud. We have heard all about the statistics. The statistics are alarming. There's no doubt. But I want to take us to the provisions themselves. Before I do that, let me make one other small point. We have, I think, the perfect storm that's brewing in St. Kitts and Nevis. And all of us come in here and we wring our hands and we say these statistics are alarming, and they are. But nobody has yet spoken to the fact, Madam Speaker, that in addition to the improvements in road infrastructure, we are also seeing a considerable increase in the number of vehicles on the road. A considerable increase in the number of people who are importing vehicles. In Little Nevis last year, I am told that we had more than 800 additional vehicles brought into Nevis last year. More than 800. If I'm to extrapolate, that is probably 3 or 4 times more than that in St. Kitts. It means, therefore, if my hypothesis is correct, that we could have had anywhere from 3,000 or more additional vehicles on the road last year alone in St. Kitts and Nevis. People now in Nevis are clamoring they need a place to park. Charlestown needs to provide more parking, etc. Because the vehicles keep coming. In some places in the world, they've tried to, again, social engineer. In Bermuda, they restricted to 1 vehicle per household. In Nevis now, I have seen some households with 2 people and 5 cars parked outside. That's become the norm. As people become more affluent, as people start to work, as we talk about the economy is growing, people want to flex. So I'm going to order a vehicle because that is an indication that I have come of age, that I'm at a point now where I'm independent. And while I applaud that and congratulate our people, we who are charged at this point in our history with leadership have to be cognizant that one thing will impact the other. More vehicles on the road, Nevis now, little Nevis, having traffic jam. Who would have thought? Cars on the road, some points, especially mornings to get to work or afternoons as work lets out. Traffic, bumper to bumper. And it's going to get progressively worse. So, I say that to say that the number of accidents could well be impacted by the number of vehicles that are now on the road. And we have to be mindful that when we legislate, that we look at the problem in as wholesome a way as we can. Now let me go very quickly to the legislation itself. Made some brief notations. I see at section 5, amendment of section 40. And there's some provisions there. I had it up here on my phone because I went to the parent legislation. I'm not sure if I could find it now. But it speaks at section 40 by replacing subsection 1, and it now talks about any person who, when driving or attempting to drive, when in charge of a motor vehicle, on a road is under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And if that person is found incapable of having proper control of the vehicle, that person shall be liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $10,000. Now, it's to my mind a little anomalous. And I don't like things that are anomalous because, again, lawyers exploit uncertainty. Because on the one hand, you're saying if somebody, when driving or attempting to drive, or when in charge of a motor vehicle on a road, is under the influence of alcohol or drugs, then you go on to say to such an extent as to be incapable of having proper control of the vehicle. You see what that means? Now let us say I have a higher tolerance than the member for St. Christopher 5. And the senator doesn't drink. Huh? Yes, but what I'm saying is you're now introducing this notion of proving that the person was under the influence to such an extent as to be incapable of having proper control of the vehicle. So if I say, yes, I was high, yes, I had 6 beers, but so what? I could still drive. It seems to me now that I can exploit this to say that notwithstanding I was under the influence, I was quite capable of having proper control of my vehicle. So the question I'm asking is, why introduce this? Why not just say, listen, this is the limit? Yes, but you tell me 41 does that, but your amendment to section 40 is what I'm looking at. So if you tell me this is the limit, if you have this amount of alcohol to blood level, you violate the law. And remove this anomaly now, or this uncertainty of what it means when you say to such an extent as to be incapable of having proper control of the vehicle. Because once you go down that road, you now create an argument. I say, yes, I was over the limit, but I was quite capable of having proper control of my vehicle. I find that that language just injects uncertainty into the provision and makes it harder for enforcement. Now, let me move to that same section, and I believe the member of number 10, member for number 10 spoke to it. And it says here in 40 that if you're driving or attempting to drive, when in charge of a motor vehicle on a road, you're under the influence, then you are subject on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $10,000 or to imprisonment with or without hard labor for a term not exceeding 1 year. And in the case of a second or subsequent conviction, either to a fine not exceeding $20,000 or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years, or to both such fine and imprisonment. But guess what? It doesn't tell you anything about the revocation of your privilege to drive, the revocation of your license. I'm only dealing with Section 40. Section 5 of the Vehicles and Road Traffic Act purports to amend Section 40. And it says nothing, Madam Speaker, about a revocation of your license. So, it seems to me that if you're driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and you're convicted, you can be sent to jail for a year, you can be charged $10,000, and if you do it again, you can be charged $20,000 and sent to jail for up to 2 years, but your license cannot be revoked under that section. I go now to Section 40, subsection 2 of the Principal Act, where it does speak to revocation of the license. It says here, a person convicted of an offense shall, without prejudice to the power of the court to order a longer period of disqualification, be disqualified a period of 12 months from the date of conviction. And if there is an appeal against the conviction from the date on which the conviction is upheld for holding or obtaining a driver's license, and on the second conviction for a like offense, he or she shall be permanently disqualified. Now, I want to address that issue about permanent disqualification, because Section 40, subsection 2, now deals with the issue of disqualification, but it speaks about being disqualified permanently after 2 infractions. If you compare that to what we are now proposing here in Section 7 of this bill, the amendment to Section 48 of the Principal Act. And the amendment to Section 48 that is reflected in Section 7(4) of this proposed bill. And for the benefit of the public, Section 48 deals: if a person drives a motor vehicle on a road recklessly, at a speed which is dangerous to the public, or in any manner which is dangerous to the public. That is what Section 48 is speaking to. And it says a person who commits an offense under subsection 1 shall be liable as follows: on summary conviction where there is no bodily injury to another person, to a fine not exceeding $6,000, or to imprisonment with or without hard labor for a term not exceeding 1 year. I just want to pause there to say that it seems to me that if you drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs, it seems that the Parliament is saying that it's more serious than if you drive recklessly at a speed which is dangerous to the public or in a manner which is dangerous to the public. Because the penalties prescribed if you drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs is $10,000 on conviction or up to 1 year. And in the case of a second or subsequent conviction, $20,000 or imprisonment of up to 2 years or both. But if you drive recklessly or dangerously, then it says where there's no bodily injury to another person, you get a fine of $6,000 or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 1 year. Where there's bodily injury, a fine not exceeding $8,000. So if you drive dangerously, recklessly, and you knock down somebody, you are getting here a fine not exceeding $8,000 or imprisonment, with or without hard labor for a term not exceeding 2 years. And on conviction and indictment, you're now gone up to the High Court, where there's no bodily injury to another person, to imprisonment with or without hard labor for a term not exceeding 3 years, or to a fine, or both such imprisonment and fine. And it goes on. Now, I want to take us over to 4, subsection 4 of Section 7. Again, we are seeking to amend section 48. And this is what it says here. Let me go first at subsection 3, sorry. A person who commits a second or subsequent offense under subsections 2A, B, and C, that is, that you drove recklessly or dangerously and that you caused injury to another person, bodily injury, or you didn't, as the case may be. Those are the offenses. They say if you do that, you shall be liable either to a fine not exceeding $20,000 or to imprisonment with or without hard labor for a term not exceeding 4 years, or to both such fine and imprisonment. So if you commit a second or subsequent offense, so you already drove recklessly and mash up somebody, you get convicted. You come back next year, you do the same thing, you get convicted. They say if you commit that second, it looks like subsequent, so you could do it a third and fourth time too. If that happens, they say you shall be liable to a fine not exceeding $20,000 or to imprisonment with or without hard labor for a term not exceeding 4 years, or to both. Now, when you go to subsection 4, a person convicted of an offense under this section shall, without prejudice to the power of the court to order a longer period of disqualification, be disqualified from holding or obtaining a driver's license for a period of 1 year from the date of the conviction, and on a third conviction for a like offense, he or she shall be permanently disqualified. Now, I ask the question. Under this section, which is dealing with reckless driving, driving dangerously, the law is allowing you 3 strikes before you get disqualified. But under the section that dealing with driving high, the law only seems to allow you 2 strikes before you're disqualified. I'm not understanding the logic of that difference, because I don't see that there's any one that is more egregious than the other. But if I were to say that one is more egregious, I would have thought that if you're driving recklessly or dangerously, damaging people, damaging property, that you ought not to be given the luxury of being allowed to do so 3 times. They say from the date of conviction, on a third conviction for a like offense, he or she shall be permanently disqualified. So I suppose what I'm asking for, Madam Speaker, is if there can be some consistency in the law in that regard. Now, that same point can be made in reference to Section 8 of this bill, because now Section 8 purports to amend Section 49. And this now Section 49, as amended by Section 8 of this bill, speaks to if a person drives a motor vehicle on a road without due care and attention, without reasonable consideration for other persons using the road, or without reasonable consideration for traffic signs. And it goes down at 8.4, a person convicted for a like offense under this section for a second or subsequent time shall, without prejudice to the power of the court to order a longer period of disqualification, be disqualified for holding or obtaining a driver's license for a period of 6 months from the date of the conviction, and on a third conviction for a like offense for a period of 1 year. So again, I understand that perhaps we are trying to create grades of offenses, and that not all offenses are being treated the same. But again, to my mind, we have to create a framework where people understand that there are consequences for breaching the law. And to meet the outcry that we have heard of so many deaths and so many accidents on the road, I think that we need to give this as much teeth as we can, and we need to enforce it. So I will make that point and move on. Before I move on, however, let me just go back to Section 40, I think it was. Section 40 of the Principal Act, at subsection 2 thereof, which is not affected by the proposed amendment, says that a person convicted of an offense under this section shall, without prejudice to the power of the court to order a longer period of disqualification, be disqualified for a period of 12 months from the date of the conviction, and if there is an appeal against the conviction, from the date on which the conviction is upheld. And so, Section 40, subsection 2 of the Principal Act creates a stay, so to speak. What it says is that if somebody is convicted, then their license can be revoked. However, if they appeal, then the appeal operates as a stay. The license will not be revoked until that appeal is upheld. And we understand the delays that are sometimes occasioned. The justice system is not always as quick as we would like. So it would mean, for example, that if I commit an offense under Section 40, for which I'm convicted in 2025, and my license is suspended, and I were to appeal, and that appeal does not come on for another 2 years, then during that period of time, I'm still allowed to drive, because the suspension of my license does not take effect until such time as the appeal is upheld. But note the difference. When you now come to this legislation that we are debating, the bill that we are debating, and you look at Section 41, where it speaks, the proposed amendment, that is Section 7, the amendment to Section 48, forgive me, where it speaks at Section 7, subsection 4, that is Section 7, subsection 4 of this bill. It says, a person convicted of an offense under this section shall, without prejudice to the power of the court to order a longer period of disqualification, be disqualified from holding or obtaining a driver's license for a period of 1 year from the date of conviction. And on a third conviction for a like offense, he or she shall be permanently disqualified. When you look at Section 8 of this bill, subsection 4, a person convicted for a like offense under this section for a second or subsequent time shall, without prejudice to the power of the court to order a longer period of disqualification, be disqualified for holding or obtaining a driver's license for a period of 6 months, etc. Now, why do I make reference to those? I make reference to those because unlike Section 40, subsection 2, there's no reference to a stay during the appeal. So again, we have a kind of duality creeping into the legislation. It seems that if you're convicted under some provisions and you are disqualified from driving, the disqualification takes effect upon your conviction. But under Section 40, subsection 2, if you're disqualified from driving, the revocation of your permission to drive does not take effect if you appeal until such time as that appeal is determined.
Yes,
And
baby love.
again, I can't understand the difference in treatment. If we are going to say that we allow the appeal to act as a stay in one scenario, then arguably should act as a stay in all scenarios. My preference is that the appeal does not act as a stay at all. But that is a matter for the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. But I wanted to raise that because, again, you find different provisions seemingly being treated differently and therefore creating an imbalance in terms of the legislation. I am wrapping up quickly. Let me just, Madam Speaker, refer to this notion of anonymous evidence. And again, I am just raising it as a query. I understand what you're trying to do. But Section, let me get this right, Section 9 of this bill speaks to the amendment of Section 50 of the parent legislation. Forgive me, I really need to go to Section 12. So Section 12 of the Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Bill, which we are now debating, speaks to the inserting of the following part immediately after Part 7 of the parent legislation. And it talks about submission of video footage. We saw the Honorable Attorney General use the screens quite effectively to show about the dash cam and all of that. In fact, we have, I think, quite properly asked the general public to help us and to record. And if they record, they can submit what they've recorded and even get some reward. I think up to $5,000, I read somewhere. So that's good. Law enforcement generally all around the world relies on the public to help them. But I want to just take that same section 12 of this bill and look at where we are proposing to amend section 98. It says provisions for anonymous evidence. A witness who provides video footage may opt to give evidence or swear to an affidavit under this act anonymously. That's a big word. It just means that they're not disclosing who they are. The court, provided that the court is satisfied that anonymity is necessary to ensure the safety of the witness or protection from harassment, and B, the identity of the witness is disclosed to the judge in a sealed record. Anonymous evidence may be given via remote means provided by the approved by the court, including a live video link. Now, what I find is interesting is that the provisions immediately above that say that members of the public can come and give evidence. And if you were to look with me, Madam Speaker, at section 9, I'm sorry, I'm going back to 9, forgive me. So I have it here. Section 12, forgive me. Subsection 2. Section 12, subsection 4. A party may cross-examine a deponent of an affidavit referred to in subsection 2 that has been introduced in evidence with leave of the court.
On this helicopter,
No.
given it was a training mission, but we heard...
It seems to me, therefore, that we say we want members of the public engaged to help us police the law. And we want members of the public, when they see reckless driving and they have their dash cam and they have their video footage, to submit it, and they may even be able to get a reward for submitting. Great, bravo, I support that. You say that the video evidence goes in, that member of the public can be asked to do an affidavit. And if they were to do an affidavit, then there's provision under this amendment, section 12, subsection 4, that that person could be cross-examined. It, however, goes down to say that there is an alternative where you can give evidence anonymously. Now, that right away creates some difficulties.
in a helicopter pilot like
And
that
again,
at this level, or in an air traffic
there are people
control
in the
tower at this level.
here who are more learned in law than I am.
Procedures.
But if you say a man is going to give evidence anonymously, then clearly there is no opportunity. Certainly none is spelled out here as to how you're going to cross-examine that person. And it therefore raises issues of due process and how reliable a conviction could be when somebody is convicted on the evidence of Mr. X, when there's no opportunity to cross-examine Mr. X or to ask Mr. X if what you say you see is really what you see. To ask Mr. X if this videotape was doctored, when the videotape was recorded, to challenge Mr. X in any way, because you don't know who Mr. X is, it's anonymous. So I am understanding why, because it sets out if the court is satisfied that this person would not be safe or would be harassed. And so if the Prime Minister were to have his dash cam and see somebody in his constituency breaking the law, he may not want to lose the vote. So he would want to say to the police anonymously that I saw this person from Keon breaking the law. But if you're going to convict somebody on evidence that is presented anonymously, and there's no provision for cross-examination, and there could be provision, because to the extent that this person is given the evidence via video, you can obscure the person's face or something like that. Technology can assist us in allowing the cross-examination, even though anonymity is preserved. Some people, for example, I've been seeing, they have terrorist trials and the like, where witnesses are behind a screen. But there's a fundamental right of anybody who is accused to challenge their accuser. There's a fundamental right for anybody who is accused to challenge the witness, the evidence on which they are to be convicted. And so I would ask that that be reconsidered, because again, I feel that there's an opportunity there for lawyers to exploit. I had a word about the amendment of the third schedule. The fines to me: offenses against section 49(1)(c), offense against section 4, this is section 13 of the bill under debate. $250 now, that's your fine. Offense against section 4, the vehicle and road traffic regulation with respect to child safety, fine of $500. I believe if we are going to get serious, let us get serious. Let us get serious. You can't tell me that you have a 4-month-old child sitting in the front and the child is in your arms or in your lap. A 2-year-old. I saw someone the other day driving in Nevis, a gentleman, and sitting on his lap while he drove was a child. If even he had an accident and there was an airbag and the airbag deployed, that child would have probably been dead. The child is sitting in his lap. And I'm not saying anything that anybody in here has not seen. And you're telling me that when somebody endangers an innocent child like that, that you're only going to fine them $500. I see 500. You're suggesting 5,000? Well, you have the eyes. But I just feel that if we're going to signal, Madam Speaker, then let us signal. Let us really say to our public that this is a national concern and that the Parliament is responding to this national concern. And we want to let our people know that there are strong consequences if they are to breach the law. Telling a man that he get a ticket for $250, telling somebody when they endanger an innocent child that their ticket is $500, I don't believe goes far enough. The Prime Minister has indicated that car seats are going to be duty-free. He has indicated that we'll try to educate mothers as they leave in the maternity ward. But I feel that you also need to give the legislation the kind of teeth that people are going to take it seriously. So, I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm not saying I have the answer. I am merely suggesting that if we are going to be serious, then let us be serious. And you have, I think, in terms of enforcement, to demonstrate with the consequences for breach that we understand the gravity of the problem and we are responding accordingly. And that, I feel, is where we are going to be able to get our people to respond responsibly. Madam Speaker, I have gone on longer than I needed to, but I needed to lend my voice because I believe that this is a national crisis. And I believe that all sides in this House share the view that we must respond. And I end by encouraging our people to be responsible, but also by encouraging our police. I say it all the time, and I know sometimes people don't like to hear it, but in other countries, the police department, the traffic department is actually a revenue earner for the police. A lot of times the money that they raise for tickets and the like is what fund their operations. And we need our traffic department and our traffic officers to be on the road. I have marveled all the time that traffic police are in the police station. But what are they going to see from the police station? Traffic is out on the road. We need to ensure they have the necessary equipment. We see a man speeding, we must have the, what they call them, the guns, the speed guns they call them. They used to have them at time and I suddenly have seen them disappear. We need to ensure that we have the cameras that the Honorable Mover spoke to. deployed, especially in areas that are prone to accidents. We need to do that. I was in Miami some time ago and I made the mistake of renting a car. And when I came back, the bill from the car rental agency had all kind of charges on there. When I checked this, I violated all kind of traffic laws. But nobody stopped me. They only send the bill. Since that, I use Uber. Uber is cheaper. But I'm just saying that we need the use of technology. Because while I'm calling on the traffic police to do more, I understand they can't be everywhere. So we really need to deploy technology. We have our cameras island-wide on the highways and byways. We need to use them in order to ensure that we break the back of this problem and that what got to crisis proportions last year is not repeated for this year and into the future. Thank you for hearing me, Madam Speaker, and I wish the bill safe passage.
Thank you to the honourable member for Nevis 9. Honourable members, before we go any further, I think this is a convenient time for some nourishment.
Madam Speaker, I was hoping that we will power through, but with your advice,
Yes, please.
I guess we could concur with the recommendation.
Yes, please. I believe we are due some nourishment, and I am suggesting an hour and some. So it is now 1:20. I propose 2:30. We return at 2:30.
Okay.
Yes, please. So the House will rise for lunch, and we will return at 2:30.
Get close, some of them go lose clothes, oh Lord, everything must crash. But you when I let go, every man go on. Don't stop that sweet tempo, till we fall. Jamming left, jamming right, jamming day, jamming night. Jumping high, wide low, steel and brass, calypso. Having fun.
And your rights. Type or speak your question.
Yep, so I need to cut these out. Damn! Whoa! This is the one. Shoot.